Have you ever noticed how the strongest person in the room is often the quietest one? Not the shy one, not the introvert, the one who used to talk the most, the one who used to care loudly, the one who used to explain everything. And then, one day, they stopped. No big argument, no dramatic exit, just silence. And that silence feels heavier than any fight ever did. If you've ever watched someone emotionally shut down, or if you felt yourself slowly speaking less and less, you know this isn't random. Emotionally exhausted people don't become silent because they have nothing to say. They become silent because they've said too much without being heard. At first, emotionally exhausted people don't look exhausted. They look engaged. They communicate. They try to fix misunderstandings. They explain their feelings. They defend their intentions. They ask for clarity. They apologize even when they're not sure what they're apologizing for. They invest because they care. And that caring requires emotional labor. It requires energy. It requires vulnerability. But when someone repeatedly feels dismissed, misunderstood, invalidated, or emotionally unsafe, something inside them begins to recalibrate. The nervous system starts learning a new equation. Speaking equals strain. Expressing equals exposure. Vulnerability equals risk. The human nervous system is not designed for constant emotional threat. Even subtle threat, criticism, unpredictable reactions, dismissive responses activate stress pathways. Cortisol rises. The amygdala scans. The body prepares. If this activation happens repeatedly without repair, the system becomes overloaded. At first, the response may be fight, explaining harder, arguing louder, pushing for understanding. Then it may shift to flight, avoiding certain conversations, distancing emotionally. But when neither fighting nor fleeing changes the environment, the freeze response emerges. Freeze is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's when the body decides that conserving energy is safer than expending it. Silence is often freeze. When someone has tried 10 times to communicate and felt unheard 10 times, the brain encodes a painful belief. My words don't change anything. This is where learned helplessness begins to form. It doesn't mean the person is weak. It means their effort has repeatedly produced no meaningful shift. The most efficient way to protect oneself from further disappointment is to stop investing in expression. Silence becomes self-protection. It reduces the chance of further invalidation. It reduces the emotional cost. There's another layer here that many people don't see. Emotionally exhausted people are often highly perceptive. They notice tone shifts, micro-expressions, subtle changes in energy. They anticipate conflict before it surfaces. That hyper-awareness is draining. Being around others becomes more than conversation. It becomes analysis. They adjust themselves constantly to keep the peace. They soften their tone. They choose words carefully. They monitor reactions. That constant self-regulation depletes cognitive resources. Eventually, the brain says enough. Silence becomes the only way to stop scanning. If someone grew up in an environment where their feelings were minimized or mocked, they may already have learned that expression invites pain. In adulthood, similar patterns can trigger old conditioning. Each dismissal reinforces an old narrative. It's safer to say less. So they shrink their emotional footprint, not because they lack depth, but because depth has historically cost them something. Silence is not emptiness. It is containment. Chronic stress also impacts the brain's ability to articulate. When the limbic system is overstimulated, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for clear communication, becomes less efficient. This is why emotionally overwhelmed people sometimes struggle to form sentences. It's not that they don't know what they feel. It's that their nervous system is overloaded. Words require energy, and energy is limited. There is also grief and emotional exhaustion. Sometimes what looks like detachment is actually mourning. Mourning the relationship they thought they had. Mourning the version of connection they hoped for. mourning the effort they invested that didn't return in equal measure. Grief doesn't always cry loudly. Sometimes it withdraws quietly. When expectations repeatedly collapse, the heart protects itself by lowering emotional exposure. People often misinterpret this silence. They assume manipulation, or punishment, or indifference. But most of the time, silence is not an attempt to control others. It is an attempt to regain control over oneself. When you cannot control how someone responds, you can control how much of yourself you offer. Silence becomes boundary by exhaustion. Emotionally exhausted people are often the ones who carried too much for too long. They were the mediator, the listener, the fixer, the stabilizer. They absorbed others' chaos and offered calm in return. But who absorbed theirs? Emotional labor without reciprocity accelerates depletion. It's like withdrawing from an emotional bank account that never receives deposits. Eventually, there is nothing left to withdraw. Silence also reduces vulnerability. Every time someone expresses a feeling, they risk rejection. If that risk repeatedly results in dismissal, the brain associates vulnerability with danger, so it shuts down the channel. This is not a conscious decision most of the time. It's adaptive. It's protective. There's something else that happens in exhaustion: detachment from hope. When someone no longer believes their words will produce understanding, motivation to speak declines. It's not that they don't care, it's that caring feels inefficient. That is a heavy psychological state, because humans are wired for connection. Silence protects, but it also isolates, and isolation deepens fatigue. Yet silence is not always the end of something. Sometimes it's the beginning of clarity. When someone withdraws, they often begin reevaluating. Is this dynamic healthy? Is this environment safe? Is this relationship reciprocal? Silence creates space for recalibration. It can be a pause before boundaries become firm. It can be the body saying, "I need distance to decide what I deserve." If you have become quieter over time, ask yourself what shifted. Was there a moment when you felt unseen? Was there a period when explaining felt pointless? Did you begin choosing peace over persuasion? There is no shame in conserving energy, but there is importance in noticing whether your silence feels peaceful or heavy. Peaceful silence restores. Heavy silence isolates. And if someone in your life has gone quiet, the most powerful question may not be, "Why are you so distant?" but, "When did you start feeling unheard?" Because silence rarely appears without history. It is usually the final chapter of repeated emotional strain. Emotionally exhausted people don't become silent because they stopped feeling. They become silent because they felt too much for too long without relief. Their quiet is not emptiness. It is the sound of a nervous system trying to survive. And sometimes that silence is not weakness. It is strength redirecting itself. It is energy withdrawing from places that depleted it. It is awareness growing in the quiet. It is someone learning that they cannot keep pouring from an empty cup. If this resonates with you, reflect honestly. Did you grow quieter because you healed, or because you shut down? Did your silence bring peace or distance? Awareness is the first step back to balance, because the loudest emotional statement is not always a scream. Sometimes it's the moment someone stops explaining altogether. And if we learn to understand that silence, we might learn to listen in ways that prevent it.